Okay, good afternoon, council and staff. Welcome to our special budget meeting of December the 6th, 2021. We're hoping that at the conclusion of today's meeting, we can have our draft budget to a position whereby we can take it to our next council meeting for adoption. So we'll call the meeting to order at exactly 4:01. Does any members of council have a pecuniary interest on any of the budget items tonight? Seeing no disclosures, you do have the agenda before you. Know I'll advise council that a couple of the reports may be presented in an order different than what they appear in the on the agenda, just to make them flow a little better. And a couple of the reports also will contain some of the latest updated information. Some of the financial news is right hot off the press as of today, so that has changed a couple of things, but staff will go through those changes when they present those reports. So with that, council, I would like a motion please to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. Councillor Allen and Councillor Powers, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, first we're going to go down to 4.1, which is a request for pre-budget approval for a pumper truck. I'll turn it over to Ted on this one.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Taylor and members of council. You have before you a request agenda item report for a request for pre-budget approval to tender or put out an RFP for one new 2021-2022 fire department pumper truck. And the recommendation is that council hereby grants the pre-budget approval to proceed with the purchase of the same. The report is there in front of you. It's very short. We talked about the background information at the last meeting of the truck being 25 years old and being scheduled for replacement in the asset life cycle replacement plan for the fire department. And with that, I'd entertain any questions that anyone would have on the report.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Questions, members of council? Deputy Clerk, go ahead, Bonnie.
I don't have any questions. We did discuss this before, and certainly because of our concerns regarding supply, the supply chain in these COVID times, I'm certainly prepared to move the recommendation.
Very good. Do I have a seconder? Second by Councillor Powers. Any questions or comments on the motion or the report? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor of the motion? Thank you very much. The motion is carried. So Ted, that gives you clear direction to go out and put the tenders forward. Now, my understanding for council's information, I believe that Greg has already contacted members of council about this, is based upon the assumption that this report would be received favorably, that the tenders will close on December 14th, which means that if that's correct, and we can move forward with a recommendation because of those tenders, there'll be a special council meeting called early on December 15th. It should only take a few minutes, but Greg, I think you've already okayed that with council, correct? All right, so hopefully keep the morning December 15th about 8 o'clock, clearing your calendar for a 10 or 15 minute council meeting. Okay, moving down now to staff reports. We've got 5.1 and 5.2. I think, Greg, are you going to present these, but not necessarily in that order? Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we're going to do the reports. I wanted to do a bit of an update to council here. We've received, as I mentioned as the mayor has mentioned, we did get our assessment roll today. So we've been frantically doing this. So we've updated some information here this afternoon and reissued some of the points. So what I'll do is, if could be some indulgent there, Mr. Mayor, I've got a PowerPoint slide that sort of shows where we're at, and then we could sort of go into the reports if that's okay with council.
Yeah, and I'll try that little trick we worked on this morning, whereby I put everybody's face across the top of the screen here.
So Heather, if you want to go right to the last slide, please. you so much. So, and I'll start off on this, and you might have some question of Jocelyn. So today, as I said, we got our assessment roll. And in the items that were published for council, that at the time that we published this particular item, we had the indication by doing some analysis that our assessment revenue increase was going to be $141,968. And today, so that was the information we had for Thursday to issue our information for this budget meeting. So today we've been advised with the receipt of the roll from the Ministry of from MPAC, from the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, that the actual assessment revenue increase for 2022 is $213,550. So there is a little bit more in that particular, and that, so that report that we're going to deal with directly next has been adjusted to reflect this particular figure. And then the assessment, the next report after that, which deals with some of the life cycle items, we've made an adjustment to those particular items. So as it sits, the conversation that we want to have with council this evening, and the discussion would detail with $182,000 worth of expenditures with a tax increase effective 2.78%. So I wanted to show this slide first, and then deal with the reports which talk about the specifics. And if there's any request or any requests for information from myself or Jocelyn, we'd be pleased to provide that before we go into the report.
Okay, so is there any questions to staff on just the information that's here? And I expect there's going to be some discussion about how numbers might be changed to get to a position where council is comfortable. But to start off with, is there any questions on what has been changed here? You can see the changes that are highlighted in yellow. And in spite of our practice this morning, Heather, I've got 3, 6, I've got 7 faces down the side of the screen, but only 3 of them are council members. So at any rate, I'll try to get you in if you've got a question. Any questions there at the moment on this? Let me change screens. Looks like we don't. Oh, Deputy Clerk, you have your hand up? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, but I can, through the mayor, I can certainly wait if, as you say, the highlighted areas are what has been changed. And if we can deal with those in the reports as they come, that is sufficient. I'd rather have each area up when we talk about them. I think right now it's premature, but if those could be spoke to when they come up, please.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Greg.
So, Mr. Mayor, so we could go to, if with council's indulgence, we would go to report 5.2, which deals with the assessment and the assessed value. So we have, what we have done is we have made some of the changes that we just spoke of and to the reports, and we reposted these reports with these new figures in there. So if you're on the website, you're seeing the new figures that we just got at 2:30 this afternoon. So Mr. Mayor, with the indulgence of council, I would go to the item 5.2, which is the supplementary operating budget, the taxable assessment overview.
Okay.
So I think the report is relatively self-explanatory. And so what this says is that we are going to get the $213,550 in new assessment, and the math is down below as far as how we arrive at that. So in 2020, our tax levy was $5,967,686. In 2021, the phased-in portion that we had, there was no phase-in. This is just growth. Was the 57,949. That's what the number we had been utilizing for up until this week, since that was the number that had been the growth number from 2021. So, and then last year we did a 2.18% tax rate increase, which included another $131,269. So our total 2021 tax levy was $6,159,904. So if you take our levy, and Jocelyn can sort of talk about specifically after I'm done here, about what the value of our levy is, and you apply the tax rate from 2021, so not the new 2022 rate. So if you just applied the existing rate to this new assessment, it would provide us with a total of $6,370,454, which gives us this net revenue increase of the $213,550. So that's how we do the math. And I'll turn it over to Jocelyn, and she can talk about our assessed values and sort of where they've gone to from the just a little over $1 billion to a little bit more in the last with this new 2022 tax law. So Jocelyn, if you want to talk to that.
Yeah, so last week when we did the agenda, basing it on what is actually in our system right at that moment, our weighted average for our assessed value was $1,080,087, and then with the new roll that we have this year, or that just came in today, so the actual roll, our weighted assessed value is 1.099. So that's what gives us our 213,550 increase over our estimated 141,986 that we had originally estimated last week. So good for us. We have currently in our what we're presenting, so the growth is actually a 3.47 increase, and as Greg had mentioned, it's a 2.78% tax increase over 2021.
I'm not sure whether any council has any question for that, Mr. Mayor.
And just to advise council, I think later on in the meeting, when we start playing with numbers, if that's what council wants to do, Jocelyn can, it's almost at the county, they call it the live eye. Jocelyn can tell you immediately what difference that will make to the tax rate. You know, in other words, if you increase something by 10,000 or decrease it by 10,000, Jocelyn can tell you exactly what that's doing. Okay. All right. Is there any questions? Deputy Clerk, go ahead, Bonnie.
Yes, through the mayor, just for clarification, so the net revenue increase of 213,550 is based on that 2.18% or the 2.78. I just need clarification.
That is the 3.47% of growth increase.
Okay, of the growth.
Yeah.
But for clarity, the numbers that were proposed in the report that we just looked at, where it gave the OMPF allocations, the life cycle allocations, and et cetera, that included the new supplementary assessment figure that you got today, and how that's been allocated in the various departments. And that's what gave us the
2.78%. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, is the council clear on that? Okay. Good, thank you. All right, so unless there's any further questions on 5.1 or 5.2, or Greg, if you had any more information you wanted to share with those reports, we could move down now to 6.1. How do you want to proceed with this, Greg?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to have if a council motion to receive the report for 5.2, and then we'll talk to 5.1.
5.2, we won't get a council motion to approve the budget allocations because we're not sure yet that that's exactly what's going to happen. But 5.2 is really just to receive the report regarding supplemental property tax assessment for 2022 in the amount of $213,550. So is council member prepared to make that motion? Simply to receive the new financial report. Councillor Powers, Councillor Howe, all in favor? Carried, thank you. All right. For as far as 5.1 goes, we'll just put that on hold right now. We've heard the information. We'll get back to it and decide exactly where we're going to land on it.
Mr. Mayor, maybe I could do some a bit of briefing around this particular report for council's benefit. That's
all right.
So under this life cycle budget recommendation, so back in 2019 when we had the conversation with council, and we wanted to pick some of our strategic directions. One of the strategic directions that we picked was really focusing on reducing our dependency on the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund and try to move that out of operating in the reserve. The second one that we put forward was about us establishing certain life cycle, specific life cycle budgets that we would be able to put money aside to fund our infrastructure and our tangible capital assets, so it would match up with our asset management plan. And so we didn't have the resources at those particular times. Our goal at that particular junction when this was introduced was to put some monies aside that would come from growth. So it would come from the growth of our taxable assessment to fund future infrastructure types of projects. So the county, they have a 2.5% levy for capital infrastructure. This is a little different with life cycle. We're trying to target the areas of greatest need. And so in this particular report, we're trying to focus on roads and we're looking to focus on recreation. So what I can tell you that I've had experience with this in the past is that we had set up life cycle reserves for projects, and they've been very, very successful. In one of my previous roles, we did a significant expansion to a recreation complex, and we were looking to debenture some money. So what we did in the planning of that is that we put some life cycle for recreation in place, and that we made annual contributions. I think at that time they were about $50,000 or $100,000 a year over multiple years. And when it was time to issue the debenture for that part of the project, what we did is we used the life cycle money to pay the annual debenture payments of that particular debenture, so that it had no tax increase at the time. So instead of we sort of put that money aside to fund that, so that we weren't looking at like a 5 or 6 or 8% tax rate increase to pay a debenture for a new initiative. We also did that for another project that I did was we bought land for a new wastewater treatment plant, and land is not eligible under senior government funding. So we utilized we put some money aside under life cycle to pay for the land acquisition to build the new wastewater treatment plant. And the third item that we did is that we did an outdoor sports complex, and we utilized the life cycle budgeting for recreation to purchase the property that we were going to do for an outdoor recreation complex, including soccer fields and those things. So they are a useful tool, and it helps you to, I guess, focus your efforts and strategic efforts and look at taking money out of growth in order to meet our requirements of our, or I don't think we'll ever meet our requirements for our infrastructure deficit, but we'll at least what we're doing is we're putting money aside to fund specific projects to help us line up with our asset management plan. So that's what we're looking to do here. And so because we had received some additional growth money, we had done an adjustment here And we would be recommending to council that we look at $100,000 for roads for a life cycle budget in 2022 and $60,000 for a recreational life cycle. So we would start this strategic endeavor that we started to talk about in 2019. So that's why it's on the agenda here tonight, because of the additional growth money that we would have received from an increase of assessment. So,
Okay, thank you. Any questions to Greg on this? Again, we will be going back to it, so I'm going to have to indulge your patience. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Just so to be clear on that, I think council gave direction that we wanted some kind of recreational park to be considered in the 2022 budget. Would we be pulling from part of it from this if we debentured, Greg, or will you speak to that later?
Mr. Mayor, through the deputy, I will speak to that with the capital budget later. So we did put money in the 2023 and 2024 budgets for park development, and you'll see how in the chart. So 2023 in Keene and 2024 in Indian River, and we typically fund our capital through a transfer from reserve, but a source could be for these types of projects for it to come from a life cycle reserve, right? So that could be a conversation that council has. And now, if you look at the two parks that we're doing here in 2022 that will be built in, I'm sorry, in 2021 that will be built in 2023. Some of that money that's going into those particular projects are coming from development charges, so specifically from growth related to Burning.
And that is covered in a couple of reports later in the agenda.
Yes.
So what should be, I think, the appropriate time to really discuss that. Is that okay, Bonnie? You got that? Okay, thank you. All right. So I know that we're going to get back to 5.1. So that's why I've just asked council just to park that one. We'll get back to it. There's a bunch of other reports here I think are fairly straightforward that we can hopefully move through and without a whole bunch of discussion. 6.1. This, I think, was requested at our last council meeting. Council wanted some clarity on how the expenses are allocated in Otonabee-South monitoring for policing. Heather, did you want to speak to this at all?
I think it's pretty straightforward, but what I can add to this, actually, if you don't mind, is I just got notification today that any trailers and campgrounds having an RDU unit class are included in the household count. No different if the campground has a commercial or industrial portion, the property is also reflected in the commercial industrial count. So that's just a little addition to the report in front of you.
Heather, what did you say about any trailer that has a which?
A residential unit class, a specific RDU class, then it is counted in the household count.
So Belmere Winds, for example, they're called modular homes. They're not even called trailers. Would they be an RUC?
Jocelyn, I don't think they have their own specific RDU, do they? No.
So does that apply to any of the trailers in this township then?
I don't believe so.
No? Okay. Questions? Deputy Clerk, go ahead, Bonnie.
Yes, thank you. So I was confused. I thought that residential use, RDU, that's what that stands for, I'm thinking, Heather. The RDUs, if you have a permanent portion, they aren't part of it then.
I think if they only have their own assessment, is it not, Jocelyn?
Okay, so they would have to get where it is that it's an umbrella because they are leasing. So
Yes.
therefore,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
gotcha.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Powers, you had your hand up, Nick. Has the question been answered?
No, my question was actually answered in terms of did we have any in the township that fit that particular description, and we don't. So that's good. Just a question on the police portion. So while I have you, $9,000 increase. So that's, I'm assuming that's in our summary sheet that'll be at the end of our discussion today, that additional 9,000.
It's included in the budget currently. I mean, the reason why it's 9,000 is because we had that
that $10,000 reconciliation. Had we have not had that, the increase would have been very minimal. And we do have a reconciliation every year, so that's what that additional charge is.
Okay, Deputy Clerk, go ahead, Bonnie.
And that reconciliation, just refresh my memory, that is based on calls, Heather. So a reconciliation, if we had more calls than previous, then that comes out as a cost factor, and then we have to pay the piper, basically.
And if there's been any increase in overtime, or if they reconciled they had their collective agreement was
Right.
then there would be that cost reconciliation as well.
Okay, thank you.
Their wage and benefits are frozen until they're locked in until I believe it's the end of 2022. So it could be 2023 that you may see an increase then.
Heather, when does our OPP contract expire? Is it next year?
We did extend it, yes, or until the new PSB is formed.
Right, correct. Okay. All right, so if there's no further questions, really, that's just to receive from information. Motion, Deputy Clerk and Councillor Powers. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Okay, council meeting schedule. This is pretty straightforward again. Has everybody had a look at it? And if it looks okay, I'd like a motion to please just to approve the council meeting schedule as circulated. Councillor Howie and Councillor Powers. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving down now to a series of finance reports, and this is where we're going to have a discussion. The first one is the department draft budget summaries. Is this going to be, Greg, you or the treasurer going to present these?
I can start. The treasurer, you can ask any questions to the treasurer. So what we've done with the decisions that have been made by council is we've distributed those particular allocations to the departmental budget. So you'll see each departmental budget here. And so the items for salaries and other fuel costs and those other distributions would be made across these particular departments. So if you have any questions, we certainly be pleased to ask, and either myself or Jocelyn or Heather can respond, or the department people that are so capably sitting here.
Thank you. Any questions from members of council on anything here? And if there is, direct it to the department. Councillor Powers, go ahead, Nick.
Thanks, Mayor Taylor. Just I do have a few questions, 4 in total, actually. The first one is around Arena, the utility costs. I see we're expecting a pretty significant savings in our utility costs for next year of about $12,700. Can we maybe speak to a little bit as to why we would expect to save money on utilities next year? Is that the LED program maybe?
It's actually, the majority of it was how the utility budget was allocated last year and the year before that. More than what was needed in the Arena went, and it was needed in other areas like roads and other departments, public property. So it was just a rejig of the current utilities to the others, as well as hopefully all savings because of the LED program.
Okay, all right. So this is more an adjustment to the actual utility costs that we're seeing versus previous budgets. Okay, all right, that makes sense. If I can, Mayor Taylor, if I can move through just a couple of other ones. So the public property one, there was ground maintenance and property repair increase of 32,500, almost 600. Are we expecting do we have specific items that we're thinking are coming forward that would increase that by 32,000 plus?
If you recall from our last quarterly report, there was a difference in the budget versus the winter maintenance line, and we needed to adjust that. So the budget was 10,000, where our actual costs were upwards of 30,000, I believe, Mike. And you have a new contract for next year to bring that down, hopefully to 20,000. So that's the adjustment. The majority of it is that winter maintenance.
So as in snow plowing and things, salting and sanding, things like that.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. So this is again adjusting to actual costs versus previous budget, I guess. Okay.
Yes.
And then the other one, I think I know the answer to this, was around roads. There was some, I believe, brushing was going down and ditching was going up, but I think we talked about this at a previous council meeting, and I believe that there was some, again, actuals versus budgeting within those two items that needed to be clarified. I see Jocelyn shaking her head. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, there were a few. So the things, the debris and litter pickup was one of the ones where it was, I think it was a typing error last year, actually. It should have been 9,900 and I was actually only put in as 900. The budget is significantly more than 900, so it had to be adjusted. So that's one of them. And then I think Craig can talk to the other amounts. But it's basically rejigging of the budget lines.
Yes, thanks, Jocelyn. Yes, so through the mayor to Councillor Powers, we have allocated a fairly substantial increase on our ditching through our internal operations capacity. We have a capacity next year proposing to focus in a lot more on ditching to preserve the roads that we have existing. And that is to involved in that is some surveying work as well as our own forces doing ditching along the rural roads. And brushing and tree removal was reduced as again, we'll be relying on our internal forces to do a large component of this work. So.
Okay. All right. And then, sorry, my very last question is around recycling. I see that we're expecting an increase of around 15,000 to our recycling costs. Is that related to the in any way to the clear garbage bag program, or is this specifically related to transfer station recycling materials being dropped off, and we're expecting increased cost to transport those recycling materials or manage those recycling materials?
Yes, the second point you raised, it's to do with the actual costs that we're seeing at the waste transfer station to deal with that waste diversion component to the waste transfer station.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mayor Taylor.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Deputy Clerk, you had your hand up, Bunny?
Yes, and just through you to our Director of Public Works, Craig, basically what you're saying is, I know last year in trying to get Drummond done, we done a lot of contracting in order to get that project finished. So this year we're looking at doing more in-house than we did in the previous year.
That's correct. Yes, we're developing work plans to do work throughout the year, dealing with ditches and brushing internally. That's correct.
Excellent. Thank
I think, Craig, the point should be made that the 2022 budget does not include any large capital projects. So that means that your staff are going to be available to do some of these things that they normally would be, because they're not going to be tied up on any one project for any significant length of time, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. Yep.
Okay, so Council, are there any other questions to any of the departments here that is presented in this draft budget summary, department by department? Anybody got anything? All the information is there. Councilor Allen, go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Mayor Taylor. Good afternoon, everyone. With regard to the wages and benefits under the arena, I'm just trying to think back to our last meeting. So there was a position that was, I think we brought a additional part-time position into the arena, which probably makes up some of that difference. But the other employee costs, the 13th, is that, I'm just not sure what that's for, the other employee costs. I was trying to think back, and it's listed in most of the the departments, so. Is
You
it a,
wanna-
di-
You
yeah, I
want to
just,
deal with that, Jocelyn? Or Mike?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Allen, through the mayor. So you're asking about the other employee costs?
right, yeah, and for some reason, I thought I recalled when we were discussing, and it was a good story in the sense that, we had usership up, or, ice time and rentals and things were up. So we had to staff appropriately for that. But for some reason, I thought we had covered some of those costs in previous years through, a budget line that maybe it wasn't sort of in the appropriate line item, and we had moved it to wages and benefits. So I just wasn't sure on the other employee costs where I don't know if that was a carryover from that last discussion or not. That's what I was looking at.
Jocelyn, you could talk to those.
Yeah,
people.
Jocelyn, do you want to?
Yeah, the other employee costs are actually honorariums, trainings, memberships. Basically, that's everything there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's fine. I just wasn't sure because we had talked about it, that it was allocated to a different line, and I didn't know if it was something that got carried over that maybe could have been adjusted there. So that's fine. Thank you.
So there used to be a line item or several line items in previous budgets that included a training and licensing and that sort of thing. And now, Jocelyn, we're just capturing them all in that one line. It's called other employee costs, correct?
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions, members of council? Councillor Howie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Just a question, I guess, with more under Craig, under roads and operating revenue. We got other revenue. We have a bit of a breakdown on that.
Jocelyn, do you have any comments about other revenue?
Yeah, so the other revenue line is actually our we have rental, roads, garage, entrance permits, sale of equipment, snow plowing, sanding and sweeping, and then grants is what's in other revenue line. It's basically everything that is not our area rates. So our Bailey Borough lights, our Burnham lights, and our basically all of our street lights. All the other revenues for roads fit under that other revenue line.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up on it, did we ever we're supposed to be looking into a market value on the other public roads building, which I don't think we've ever seen anything there, especially with the rental rates that have gone up now in the last number of years. It's just, we could look at an increase of revenue on that.
Yeah, we talked about that at a previous council meeting not all that long ago, Councillor Howie, and council made the decision to accept the recommendation at that time for whatever the rental rate is for 2022, I believe. So because it's not directly related to the budget here and the decision was made, I think that we should just park that one. If you'd like more information on it, I would suggest contact staff at tomorrow or the next day. Okay.
Very well, thank you.
Deputy Clerk, go ahead.
Yes, I remember, and that can be parked and come back at another meeting because it was read for the second time, but not the third in that meeting. If we look back at our minutes, so it needs to be parked and come back.
Sure, that's fair enough. Yeah.
If I do have a
You're muted, Bonnie.
so just coming back to wages and benefits on the arena, I'm assuming that the increase of wages and benefits does include increased part-time staff because we have been busier. So that just Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I just wanted to make sure my assumption was correct. Thank you.
Yep. No, I think that exact point was made at our last budget meeting.
I need apparently I need to be refreshed. So I just want to make sure that I have remembered correctly.
Not to worry, don't we all? All right, any further questions from members of council on the department summaries here? Projected costs for 2022 that have been worked into our draft budget. Seeing none, Heather, do you want a separate motion as we go through these, or just one motion to receive the finance report? How would you like to deal with it?
Mayor Taylor, you can do it either way. You can do it individually, or you can do it as a lump one at the end. Your preference?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I could offer, if we could do them separately, because you're going to be approving, hopefully approving separate capital items and those sort of types of things. So if you could maybe do them separately, please.
Okay, so you've got your 7.1, which is department draft budget summary. Motion please to receive this for information as part of our draft budget. Deputy Clerk and Councillor Howie, all in favor? That is received. Thank you. Okay, the next one is a good one. It's the capital budget draft 7.2. Who's going to lead us on that one?
Mr. Mayor, I can start, and then if you, I would suggest maybe we'll start with the 2022 capital budget, and then maybe you could walk us down through this particular document, and if members of council have any questions about any of the departmental areas, we would be pleased to answer.
So these are the capital projects that are built into our 2022 budget. And
That
the
is
appropriate, the cost and where the revenues will come from.
The majority of the revenue comes from transfer from reserve, so you'll see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas is where they would where that revenue would be originated from.
Potentially, right. So any questions to staff and members of council on our capital plan? This is what we hope to do in 2022. Go ahead, Deputy Clerk.
Yes, through the mayor. Hearing that Craig does, we don't have staff at the roads department pulled to any large capital project. So we do have that staff available. I'm still asking for some consideration for monies to be set aside for something to be done. We can have a step-by-step plan for Keene, but I do want to see something in the budget for the Keene Parks as we promised our taxpayers for the last 4 years. And I am disappointed that we haven't come back with that line. So I'm wondering how other council members feel, but I would like some kind of dollar figure put in there for the Keene Park so residents know that we aren't waiting till 23.
Okay, you did see, I would expect in the 5-year capital plan that $100,000 has been allocated. Okay, fair enough.
Excuse me, Mayor Taylor, that would be a start of 2023 if I'm correct.
Excuse me, I didn't quite catch the question.
Just that allocation would be starting in 2023 was my read.
Well, I guess staff can clarify this, but my understanding was that we would embark on a similar process for the El Getty and the Burnham Meadows playground equipment, whereby we would have an open house with some options, and the residents would come along and help us decide which playground equipment they like the best. And then that with an upset limit of about $100,000, and that would be installed in use in 2023. I think that's the plan as it's currently presented.
Okay, that's certainly, as long as we've got our open house and everything set for this spring, I would like to see some movement on that. So I'm satisfied with that, just so they realize it's coming for.
Yeah, if I know the Mike Nelson was instrumental in this, and it went over really well for the El Getty and the Burnham Meadows. The residents were very appreciative, and it helped us buy them what they wanted. So because it works so well, I don't know why we would change it. And I believe that was council or staff's intention. Go ahead,
Mr.
Bonnie.
Mayor, I can
Yeah.
speak to that and maybe Mike can sort of finish with that. So our goal would be to sometime, so we would get the Burnham Meadows and Elgetti facilities that they would be installed and completed. And then we would move on. We're hoping by the third quarter to issue the RFP, right, for us to be able to do a call for proposals for different designs for the Keene facility. Then we would bring, once those closed, we would bring that back in, and there would be the open house, and I'll let Mike sort of go from there. He would be responsible, very similar to what we did with Elgetti and Burnham.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, through the mayor to Deputy Mayor Clark, that Greg hit it on the head there. That's sort of our plan, is to get the spring projects done at Burnham Meadows and Elgetti. As we discussed, I think, like we said, it'd be pretty hard to have all three on the go at once, but as soon as we get those done, hopefully in May, or if not early June, depending on conditions in the spring, we can get an RFP out and get some proposals early. If we already have an approval from council to go ahead with it in 2023, we can get that done midsummer, and then even have our meeting with the public this in late 2022, or as soon as we can get those RFP proposals in. And then as we said, that way we should be assuring ourselves of getting that playground installed in 2023 as we plan.
Okay, go ahead, Deputy Clerk.
Yes, so to that point, I think we need to have our open house. We've got the template, and Michael did it very well for the two. I would like to see the open house and input around that in the spring. And then certainly with the understanding that we put the RFP in it to be done in 2023. But I would like to see an open house, and whether we put a preliminary out with changes, get the input, but I would like to see that open house by June of 2022. I don't know how other council members feel, but we've got the template. Michael knows how to do it. It was done well. And certainly, I think that is an expectation I would have.
Okay, staff have heard that. Before I go to Councillor Powers, I'll make the comment, I think, for all council members to staff, and that is that what council clearly doesn't want to see happen is a delay that would prevent anything from happening in 2023 because of COVID or any other reason. So the sooner we get this plan in place, the sooner we get it ordered, committed from whatever company we're going to be doing business with, so there is some assurance it can happen in 2023, the better. And so if, as Deputy Clark has said, if that means the design needs to be approved and ordered by the end of the summer 2022, that wouldn't surprise me, but that's what needs to be done then. It could be a different council next year. I mean, I understand that. We all need to consider that. However, it'll be the same residents, and they've been calling for this for quite some time. So we do have, I think we do have the resources, we do have the finances, we do have the ability to make it happen. We just have to make sure that we're cognizant of delayed orders and not let that affect us any more than it possibly could. So I saw Councillor Powers with his hand up. Go ahead, Nick.
Well, Mayor Taylor, you spoke the same words I was about to say very eloquently. So I will sort of leave it there, that I would agree that we need to move the process forward, recognizing that we don't necessarily have to build it in 2022, but we do need to move the process forward, knowing that there are potential and likely delays related to the project and the materials, and the sooner we can move it forward, the better. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, did you have your hand up, Mark?
Sorry about that. Thanks, Mayor Taylor. I too, I fall in line with many of the other council in the sense that I am disappointed that I don't see this in the 2022 budget. I do think there are possible ways to make that happen. It may need to include additional funds for some construction management and other contracted services around consulting and such. If we move forward and leave it in capital 5-year plan in 2023, although I still would like to, if there is a way that staff can suggest 2022, I do think that residents of Keene and surrounding areas have waited long enough. It's been asked for a long time. And I would like to see that, but if we do wait, I think those words have been spoken. It can't be delayed in 23. It has to go in the ground as early as possible. And the process really does need to start sooner rather than later, as far as choosing options and things like that with the input of our residents. So that's kind of more of a comment, but I would be open to consideration for adding a 20% increment to that $100,000 allocation to see some construction management or services if staff think we can manage it through something like that. I think it would be worthwhile considering. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, is there any staff member? There was not necessarily a question asked. If there's no staff member feels the need to respond, then we'll go to Councillor Powers, who has a hand up. Go ahead, Nick.
Just following up on Councillor Allen's comment, not necessarily the 20%. I'm actually curious in terms of the budgeting process. Is there value in us putting some dollars, some amount in the capital budget in 2022, knowing that there is preliminary work? So this would be funded over 2 years with the actual implementation to take place in 2023. I'm not sure from a finance and procurement side of things if there's value in doing that. I'm just curious if we do start that procurement process and have some initial funding in 2022, does that help us with our order?
Yeah.
I can speak to it a little bit, maybe Mike, but I guess I don't know about our order. We have to get the RFP out. If you look at the numbers we're carrying, so we did 80,000 for Algety. And so we're budgeting 100,000 for Keene. So we're actually budgeting for a bit of a higher, well, significantly higher value, because we anticipate that A, supply is going to be an issue, and B, cost is going to be an issue. So we didn't want us to get into that chasing our tail that says we didn't put enough money aside. And so that's why we're doing 100,000 in this particular case. And so, again, we're not going to know what the costs are going to be until the RFP is issued. And so, and that will also entail what the delivery might be. So if council remembers, when we did the RFP in August last year for Burnham Meadows and Algety, we got the pricing locked in, and which was a really advantageous thing for us. But they were really concerned about supply chain issues, and that's why we're into 2022. So that's why we want to try and get the RFP out and have it replied to with the different designs, so that we could have our public open houses sometime in that sort of August time period or July time period, so they can actually see the designs that we received as a result of the request for proposal document. So that's how we did that process. And so we knew what the costs were, and we knew what the things looked like. And then Mike went through the whole process of having the open houses and getting people's feedback on what they liked and didn't like on the designs that were being proposed. I don't know, Mike, I think that was, I don't know if you have anything more.
The only thing I would add to that, Greg, is that for the Algety playground and the Burnham Meadow one, there was a deposit involved. So we paid a deposit basically in 2021, and then we're going to pay the rest in 2022. So if we wanted to go through with ordering it in 2022, we would likely have to pay some sort of deposit in 2022.
And we would bring that tender to council, which would include the payment of the deposit.
And when we're talking about cost of this project, we can't overlook the fact that there is a donation waiting to be added to it. Okay, so again, those details will be fleshed out later, but that's going to be my guess is that would be added to the township's contribution, not part of it. At any rate, Deputy Clerk, you had your hand up, Bonnie. Go ahead.
Yes, and to that, and Michael brought it up there through the mayor. Certainly, what kind of down payment do we need to have, and does that not need to be in the budget? And the preliminary costs here, I think, should be part of this budget process to make sure that you're not tied. So what kind of down payment, what cost to the open house and that was there that we can build this into this year's budget?
Our deposit for Algetti Park, Deputy Mayor Clark, it was 22,000 of a total of about 87,000, I think was the total cost of Algetti, and we're paying 22,000, so approximately 25% of the total cost. I'm not exactly sure what the percent is. I haven't figured that out, but
That's fine, Michael. So I think there has to be some money that we do put in so to make this project, so we aren't tying the staff's hands, the wishes to go ahead. So that needs to be a consideration.
What's some options there, Greg? I know that the money will come from reserves. Would there be, or Jocelyn, would there be merit in, instead of putting, let's say, $25,000 into the 2022 budget, and then only 75,000 allocation in the 2023 budget in your capital plan? Does that make any difference?
It doesn't make any difference because we fund from reserve. So we have to come with the budget. So when we bring the tender to council, we'd be talking about the deposit, and then we would ask for authorization to transfer from the parks reserve to pay the deposit on that particular project. So it doesn't make any difference in our budgeting. So I see Jocelyn nodding her head there too.
So go ahead, Deputy Clerk, and then Councilor Allen.
And to that point, it doesn't make any difference, as you say, it's coming from reserves. I think it is a show of good faith and our intent to show that line in our budget from 2022.
We'll move to Councilor Allen and then Councilor Powers. Go ahead, Mark.
Just to follow Deputy Mayor Clark's comment as well, I do think it would be prudent that we show a line item, especially as you mentioned, Mayor Taylor, that we are going to an election year. I'd like to have this project shown in the 2022 capital budget, because I would like to show the commitment to the next council that this council left behind, as far as a commitment to the community to have this park move forward. So I too would like to see that line in the 2022 capital budget, like a percentage of what we plan to spend for 2022, and move forward with that capital budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll get back to that as soon as I've heard all the comments. Councilor Powers, go ahead.
I was just going to echo that. I also would like to see the down payment be made available for the 2022 budget line. So I think the 25% that Mike was referring to earlier seems appropriate. So I would certainly be in agreement with taking 25% from the 100,000 and moving that to the 2022 budget, so that it's available and it's identified that we will be moving forward with the procurement process and the down payment process in 2022.
Councilor Howie, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Taylor. Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea to move forward the same way with that 25% in the budget. I think it shows that the residents know what's coming then, and it's not something that's put off again.
Okay, and so just to confirm, and I'll ask staff to respond to this, just to confirm, this will make no difference in our 2022 tax rate or 2022 budget. It's simply adding a line item to our capital plan. with a $25,000 allocation for Keene playground equipment. And then in your 5-year capital plan, that 2023 line will now read 75,000. It doesn't make any difference. Am I correct on that? All right.
Mayor Taylor, I've adjusted the 2022 budget to say Keene OMCC Park Playground deposit, 25,000 for this year. And I've adjusted the 5-year capital plan now so that in 2023, it reads 75,000 for the Keene. Is that okay with everyone?
Very good. And I think that is exactly what council was looking for. So where are we here? We're on the 2022 capital budget draft. Those changes have been made. So if at the end of this, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve it, but are there any other areas in this budget draft, capital budget draft, that we want to discuss? The CAO made a commitment to me today that the public property capital plan is going to happen in 2022. So we shall see. But he's got the thumbs up. All right. Anything else from members of council on the capital? As I said earlier, you'll notice that there are no capital roads projects. It's a lean budget. It's a tough year and it's a lean budget, and the departments have had to plan accordingly. So there's just not a lot of there's no excess here. And I know Greg has been very firm on all the department heads that some of these big capital plans that we would like to do are simply going to have to wait for another year. So I'm not seeing any further questions. I guess I just like a motion, please, to approve the capital budget draft as amended. Deputy Clerk, Councillor Howie, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go now to the 5-year forecasts, and we've already made one change to that. What just happened there? Okay, when I click on the 5-year capital plan, I'm getting our assessment and tax information link.
On my account. So
Mark,
am I, Taylor.
Yeah, I am too.
Okay, so let's click on the assessment and tax information and see what that gets us. Oh, same thing. Okay, we got a little technical glitch here. It was available earlier. So can you screen share that with us? So we'll screen share the 5-year forecast plan here.
My apologies, Mayor Taylor. I'm gonna have to get Jocelyn to resend it because the one she sent me is the one that I posted.
Okay, no problem. While we're doing that, let's just move down to the reserves and development charge estimates.
And while
Are there any questions? This gives you a snapshot of the estimated balances of the various reserve lines. Councillor Powers, go ahead, Nick.
I think it's worth noting here from previous discussions with Greg and Jocelyn related to the life cycle. These would be net new reserves within here. So when we talk about moving things into life cycle, they wouldn't be going into these reserves, they'd be going into net new ones. So I think that's worth noting as we're reviewing that.
Mr. Mayor, through the council powers, yes, that is correct.
Right. We have called them in other years and in other governments, we have called them dedicated reserves. And I think it's essentially the same thing, is it not? Yeah, so it's
Yes,
another,
yes. Yeah.
it's another name for dedicated reserve, where we used to have at sometimes we might have a reserve specifically to replace a pumper truck. And instead of just going to the general fire reserve, it would be for that dedicated cost only. So this is the same concept, just called life cycle.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's the same concept. The same thing is that, as I said, the county has put forward a 2.5% infrastructure levy. So we're just trying to really be a little bit more finite about how we sort of match stuff up with our tangible capital assets for
Right.
our asset management.
Right, yeah, it is, council, it's really good financial planning. It obviously it comes with a cost, but it's positioning ourselves for the future much better than this continuing to ignore it. We can't do that. And so there's some changes that we've made. The OMPF allocation to reserves was a very important decision that this council made back about 3 years ago. And I'm really pleased that our CAO brought that recommendation forward, that council bought into it, because it's obvious to me how important that could be. It's important to us every year, but someday if the OMPF funding were to dry up, the council of the day will be really glad that we've done it this way. And that's unfortunately a possibility. So back to the reserves and development charge estimates. Are there any questions there on any of the figures? Is just again for information purposes. We talked about a lot of reserve spending, and this is where it's coming from. Councillor Powers, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Taylor. Just a question actually around the planning and the building reserves. They seem to be both quite healthy, I would say, generally speaking, for those two departments. And I would say that in general, those are two departments that don't always rely or have a reliance upon reserve funds for projects or assets. I'm curious, with a lot of the planning activity that we're experiencing, the building activity, the excess funds would fund into these reserves. Do we ever get to a point where these reserves are a little bit bigger than we would ever need, and we need to reallocate those in some way? I'm just curious.
I can speak to that, Mr. Mayor, and I know Ken could probably sort of jump in there as well, though. So what we do is I guess the premise of this reserve is to put money aside when times are good for to fund the department when times are lean. So we are getting good permit revenue and planning application revenue, and so under Bill 124 for building, we have to be self-sustainable, and we want to try and have a self-sustainable planning department as well. But let's say in 3 years, the building activity dries up, and that so that what you would do is you would draw upon the reserve in order to pay for some of your fixed costs in order to keep your building department running, so that you're not supplementing it from municipal tax. So that's the purpose for the reserves. I know, Ken, I think that's the virtue, I guess why that the reserves are built in such a fashion. Yeah,
I think you've covered it pretty well. I mean, at some point, this excess activity is going to cease because there are unusual circumstances in the last couple of years with all the stuff that came online, but they are going to end. And then you'll be back down to normal activity, and we may or may not have enough revenue coming in. And of course, that's where your reserves are going to handle it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? We still are on the reserve development charge portion of our agenda here. Deputy Mayor, you had a question on this one?
Yes, so just to clarify, so next year, what's going to be different than this one, we'll have that life cycle reserve then, Greg? That will start showing up then here as well. This year, of course, it isn't on because we haven't done it before, so.
Mr. Mayor, through to the Deputy Mayor, there would be two additional ones, one for life cycle for roads if council approves it, and one for life cycle for recreation. And
Okay,
then our hope in the future years, it would be to add additional life cycle accounts. Should we be able to afford it?
okay. Now, the other thing that the reserves that's it's about halfway down, it's 12,993. No, I lied. It's 3,417. And it's COMM dot improvement. What is that reserve?
That's a community improvement, and Jocelyn, I'm not sure if you pull up that account, but it's reflecting.
I think we got some funding for that several years ago.
We did get
provincial government.
some funding to.
Was that
towards-
was that
Jocelyn may have the details there.
Fund Pro.
Which account was that we were looking at in reserves?
The community improvement, it's about halfway down in the first column. 3,000, it's only $3,400.
Mr. Mayor, you might have lost the deputy mayor here too, so the issue's frozen.
Okay. Well, if Jocelyn can answer, Bonnie may be able to hear us.
It's an opening balance. I'm gonna have to go back.
I believe, Mr. Mayor, that was the proceeds of some of the money that we got for community development for downtown.
I think
And
that's
some of the
correct.
signs, some of the market signs and that.
Digital signs to reserves, yeah.
Yeah, I think
It's
that's
what's
my
remaining.
recollection. It's been there for a few years. Okay. So what we're going to do is if there's no further questions on the reserve and development charge chart,
Oh,
Councillor Powers, you had another question? Go ahead, Nick.
I did, yeah, just the cemetery line, with us taking over some additional cemetery activities and properties, is there an expectation that we may need some additional reserve funds moving forward? I'm just curious. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can. Who's Heather, did you want to take that question? Dealing with cemeteries?
Thanks, Mayor Taylor. Through you to Councillor Powers. Yes, you're probably right that there could be an increase in cost. We do have the caretaker that does look after the facilities, and we do have somebody else that cuts the grass over in South Monaghan on the Dawson Cemetery. And I'm sure, pricing is going to go up at some point. So yes, I would assume that there's probably going to be some additional funding requested. And if we have to go in and do any maintenance work in terms of, reconfiguring some of the monuments to stand them up straight again or anything like that, it's kind of an unknown.
And sorry, just to follow up, so then that would be funded, that wouldn't be funded from reserves though, would it? It would be funding through operating budget, I'm assuming?
It'd be operating.
Right.
Council want to establish some type of reserve in order to actually go and I know it's at one point they did talk about redoing some of the monuments because of the age.
Right, okay.
Cost to do that.
There was also discussion, Heather, about perhaps a need for some improved fencing around one or some of the cemeteries that could come out of a cemetery reserve as well.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
Okay.
I was just curious. Thanks.
And unfortunately, Deputy Clark seemed to have lost connection, and I have to flip screens here to see Councillor Allen. Okay. Is there any further questions on our reserve and development charge chart? Oh, Councillor Allen, go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Mayor Taylor. It's just a quick question. The deferred revenue cash in lieu of parklands, which I know how it's collected, it's used, just to clarify for me, it's used in some of the items that we've talked about, upgrades to parks and such. Am I correct in thinking that? I just asked for that clarification.
Mr. Mayor, through the council, yes, it would be utilized for some of those particular purposes. Or if, if council decided you wanted to buy additional lands for park purposes, those are the types of uses that we could access that reserve to fund those types of expenditures.
Thank you. All right, so I'd like a motion, please, just to receive the reserve and development charge estimates to be included in the 2022 budget. Councillor Powers, and seconded by Councillor Allen. Call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, so now we have on the screen sharing here, we still don't have Deputy Mayor Clark. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm sure Bonnie is trying to get back on, even if she has to do it by phone. But this is the 5-year capital plan forecast, and there have been changes made to the Keene playground line. Are there any questions on this capital forecast report here? I'm not seeing any questions. And Deputy Clerk is still, I would sure like it if she could get back in for the last part of the conversation, but I won't hold it up. So if there's no questions, and I'll just flip the screen here to make sure. Any questions at all? I'm not seeing any. I'd like a motion, please, to receive the 5-year capital plan forecast report. Councillor Howie and Councillor Allen, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, the assessment and tax information. Sorry, I was muted myself. This is showing what the tax implications would be to the various property classes based upon the latest version of Jocelyn, which was a 2.78% increase. Is that correct? So this has been updated to reflect that. Okay, so what Jocelyn has the ability, this is how I think we should do this. I think this will make the most sense. Jocelyn has the ability to incorporate any recommended changes, if there are any, to the draft budget, to that 2.78%. So this is where it is now. I guess what I'm going to suggest, and Greg Bordas, you tell me whether this will work. I'm going to suggest we just simply receive this, and then we go back up to 5.1. And that's where we will decide if there's going to be any changes made. And Jocelyn can tell us what the impact would be.
I just have a quick question, Mr. Mayor. I think what has been circulated, and I'm not sure what you're seeing online, Jocelyn, I know that the original chart that we distributed was for that 2.99%. Did you recalibrate the chart? And maybe we could look at the chart. Are you able to screen share the chart, Heather, just so we can go through that? I just want to make sure that we could speak to that particular item, because the original chart that we had been circulated was a little different.
So this one here is the up-to-date version on the.
That's why I wanted to ask that question, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's the one that is, the one that Heather has put online is the newest.
Okay, Greg, did you want to screen share that and discuss it for a moment?
I think it would be a good exercise on, that's the different one that we were talking about. It was the other one about the budget change, and I'm not sure whether you have it there, Jocelyn, or whether Jocelyn screen shares or Heather screen shares.
Sorry, Greg, which one are you referring? Are you looking for the assessment changes that shows like per thousand or
per
100.
thousand per household and that sort of type of thing. So I just want to make sure we're talking about the same one so that we can
Yeah,
be very
yeah.
clear.
The one that Heather updated this afternoon online is the most recent one. So
Okay,
either her or I can share it.
so if you just bear with us, it's like, it's important, I think, to talk about these particular values, Mr. Mayor. For council. And I've not heard anything back from the deputy here. So
No, we're still waiting on that last report to be screen shared here.
Guys, I had, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I had a power outage quickly in Keene here, so she might have experienced the same thing if you guys froze on me for a sec, but it came back so fast that I got right back on, so
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
no problem.
So are we going to screen share this last report?
here she comes. There we go.
That's the one. Okay. All right, Greg, go ahead. If you or Jocelyn just want to lead council through the various lines.
Yeah, I'll let Jocelyn lead it through.
Okay, so this basically shows us what our tax change is per, the top is per 100,000 of assessment value. So we show 4 different tax classes. So residential farm, farmlands, commercial and industrial. So it shows what the amount per $100,000 of assessment they would have paid for in 2021, what the estimated that they will pay for in 2022 based on the budget that we're presenting, and what that dollar change is for a year. So $16.09 for residential per 100,000, $4 for farmland, $17.67 for commercial, and industrial $24.82. That is further broke down that per installment. So February, April, July, and September, it's $4, $1, $4, $4.50, and $6. That's per 100. The next section that you see is 2021. Sorry, is the average. The average based on how many residentials we have. The average OSM assessed value for residential is $282,537. Farmland 360,000, commercial 286,000, and industrial 175,000. And then it shows basically what they would have paid in 2021 versus their estimated that they will pay in 2022 based on the current proposed budget. So that is for residential, that's an increase of $45.45. Farmland, an increase of $14.48. Commercial, $50.61, and in industrial, $43.46. The section below this, sorry, it looks like when I updated it, I did have it so that 2021 was above. But this one, you will see what they paid in 2020 versus what they increased to in 2022 with our 2.18% budget increase that we did last year.
Okay, any questions to Jocelyn on this? Councillor Powers, go ahead, Nick.
Thanks, Mayor Taylor. Jocelyn, just a question. I'm trying to get my head wrapped around this a little bit. Looking at the difference from the what it looked like in 2021 line and the what it looks like in 2022 lines. So in 2021, when we moved from 2020 to 2021, we had a I think it was 2.18, you said, I believe it was 2.18. So we look at the residential, that was a change of $61.07 as it's on here. The the 2021 to 2022 current projection is 2.78, which gives us a residential change of $45.45 for the year. My head is telling me, why is that less when it's 2.78% that we've increased it versus the 2.18 that seems to be higher last year than this year? And I know there's a logical financial answer to this. I'm just not sure I can get my head wrapped around it just yet.
And it's really very simple, Mr. Mayor, very simple math. Your base of your assessment is higher. So when you times your mill rate, you get a higher value, right? So your base is, as she said, as the treasurer indicated, our base went from 1.066 billion to 1.099 billion. So when you times the mill rate by it, you get a lesser value because it's being distributed across more assessments.
Okay,
Exactly.
perfect. Perfect. Thank you for that. I will say, by the way, this is very handy, this chart, just to see the year over year and sort of refresh ourselves a little bit. And so I appreciate that. Thanks, Jocelyn.
Okay, and this is exactly the numbers that would be used if we go back to the report 5.1 and nothing has changed. This is the impact to our residents in the various classes. Okay. Any further questions on it? Let me just flip the screen here. Councillor Allen, go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Mayor Taylor. I guess, and maybe we're not at this part of the program yet. What I was wondering is, and I like the way everything's coming together in the budget and the budget discussions. And further to that, I think it's the life cycle discussion. And are we, when you're asking if there's any questions on that, or are you talking about taking a look at that number, or those numbers as far as the allocation within this budget to follow through on what's recommended from staff?
I think so. I think logically, if we're going to make any adjustments to the draft budget, when we go back to 5.1, you're going to see there is our OMPF, here we are there, the OMPF special levy,
Yeah,
and the 2 life cycle allocations. That's where, if we're going to make any changes, it's most obvious to me that they would be made. And that's where, if changes are made, then this chart that we're just looking at now would be adjusted, but Jocelyn can adjust it live. So I'm just going to give you an example. And before I move too far in this, we are going to have to receive that report, but the life cycle recreation and the life cycle roads. If each one of those were to be reduced by $10,000, Jocelyn can tell us almost instantly what that would mean to the tax rate. Okay, so I think my guess is, I've been through this, I've been through a lot of budget meetings. My guess is that's where council wants to go, because that's always what's important. So before we get there, let's go back to the assessment chart, the assessment value chart. Are there any further questions on it? And if not, could I get a motion, please, just to receive it for information? I'm seeing Allen and Powers, all in favor? Carried, thank you. All right, council, now let's go back to 5.1, which is what is being screen shared right in front of us. And this is where we can have a discussion to see where we want to go. I will mention for the record and for council's information that it looks like, unfortunately, Deputy Mayor Clark has lost Wi-Fi, lost connectivity. So I have texted her the call-in phone number. I hope she's getting her texts. And perhaps if a staff member could call her on her home number, you might be able to get her that way. I don't want to try an hour, I'll miss something here, but her home number is 295-4434. If a staff member could call her and give her the call-in number, because this is the part of the discussion, it would be nice if all members of council could be a part of.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, so she has lost hydro in her home, so I don't know whether her phone will work.
Yeah, her landline should.
it might work. We can try, but.
And
again,
her cell should also.
Okay, I will go offline here and try to find her and so I'll go offline and see whether we can get them.
And I'll explain to council, because I've gone through this. We had a meeting earlier today. In fact, twice we discussed this. The reason that Greg has put $125,000 into that OMPF special levy, in other words, that's how much would go into reserves, is because that will leave us with exactly $100,000 that we're using in our operating. And it is the expectation, or at least the hope, that next year, the council of the day will make a similar decision to use the remaining $100,000 of OMPF funding for a reserve allocation, which will completely wean us off of that funding for operating. That's why there's $125,000 plugged into this amount. That's the recommendation from staff. I guess we'll go to the three, and then I'll just open it up for questions. Because of the additional supplementary assessment revenue that we were provided, the recreation special levy was increased. This is staff's recommendation, increased to $60,000, and the road special levy was increased to $100,000. By doing that, it brings us to a tax rate increase of 2.78%. So with that, and I think it's pretty straightforward, I'm sure all council understand it quite well. With that, I'm just going to open it up for questions, comments, or suggestions. We'll have Councillor Powers, then I have Councillor Allen, and then we'll go to Councillor Howie last. Go ahead, start off, Nick.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Taylor. I will start by saying, if it comes to priorities, I would lean towards moving that OMPF or keeping that OMPF at the 125. I think that makes logical sense. We've made a commitment and a priority to that over the last few budgets to try and get that thing off of our operating budget. And it seems logical to me that if we have the opportunity to further reduce it, we take that opportunity and run with it. The life cycle ones, I'd like to see, as much as I am all for trying to get as much as we can into these life cycle reserves and recognizing that there is a gap. I also recognize that 2.78% is a little bit more than I'm comfortable with at this point in time. So if it push came to shove, I would probably look towards those two life cycle levies, a reduction in those two life cycle levies without touching that OMPF. That's sort of my thoughts initially at this point.
Did you want to make any recommendation with regards to amounts, just to play with it and see what it does, Councillor Powers?
Well, I'd like to go back to where it was. So keep the 125 with the OMPF, and the previous life cycle amounts were, I believe, 40 and 80. Where does that put us now? I guess if we didn't touch the increases in our previous discussions, I believe there were 40 and 80. And if we just moved those back to where they were initially and we kept the OMPF at 125, what does that do?
Jocelyn can tell us that. So, Jocelyn, have you changed that to 40 and 80? So you've eliminated $40,000. You've put it back into operating. What does that do to the tax rate?
I believe it was 40 and 85, Greg, is that?
Yes, it was 40 and 85, I guess.
Okay.
I guess our recommendations that we thought we're really trying to not cannibalize our tax rate. And so, our recommendation to council is that we were going to reduce this particular item, these items, that we would reduce it to, our recommendation would be to reduce recreation first and either reduce it by 10 or 10,000 or 50 or 10,000 to $20,000 to do that. And as the mayor said, we're pretty lean on roads these days, but that would be our some advice to share with council.
So let's get Jocelyn. If we just pull 20,000 out, whether it's 10 and 10 or 20 out of one line, what does $20,000 do to the tax rate?
Okay, if I remove 20,000 from recreation, that puts us at a 2.46.
2.46. correct? Okay, so it's just under 2.5%. And so I'm not going to ask for any decisions now. I just want some ideas to come forward and staff can give us the information. Councillor Allen, you go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Mayor Taylor. And I too like what we've done within the budget process, the OMPF special levy, how we've gone forward in the last few years to try to wean ourselves from that as an operating budget. I too would look at the life cycle. I actually was going to suggest looking at, like, can we start at half, like 30 and 50, and just see what that looks like? Because 2.78 again, although I think we're getting there. It's not exactly where I'd like to see it. It's a little bit uncomfortable to me. I'd like to see what that brings. This is a new concept as far as budgeting. I understand the importance of it, but I do feel like we're moving forward with the OMPF, and we've done good things with that in the last couple of years. And I do want to be fair to our residents and take a look at what that would mean. So that was just my suggestion. Councillor Powers had another suggestion. But if this is the two line items that we're going to work with, that's where I'd like to see what that would look like as well. So I'll leave it with that.
We can do that. So Councillor Allen, you would just like to know what would happen if we reduced both special levy lines by 50%. Is that correct?
That's what I was asking. Yes,
so
please.
that's a change of $80,000. What would that do to the tax rate, Jocelyn?
Hi, I'm here on the phone.
Oh, good, Bonnie. Okay, good. We're just getting into the meat of the discussion now, and I'll kind of summarize some of the comments so far for you as soon as we answer Councillor Allen's question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jocelyn, by reducing these two life cycle levies in half, what does that do to the tax rate?
Yeah, so if we did that, that would reduce us to a 1.52%.
1.52, but it's taken a significant hit on those two reserves.
It's taking the majority of the growth that we were putting away for additional growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I guess our and that's why that was our comment about potentially cannibalizing our tax rate. I guess we'd certainly like to try to stay somewhere in the neighborhood of what we did last year, which is the 2.18, at least that particular amount, so that we are taking advantage of the growth opportunities that we received this year.
Yeah, I think it needs to be stated. I mean, I understand council's and my concern as well with keeping the tax rate as low as we can, but the difference to the taxpayer between, I'll just pick two numbers there, between 2.25% and 2.5% is just pennies. I mean, it's very, very minimal. Councillor Allen, you had your hand up. I will let you comment further, and then I'm going to summarize where we are for Deputy Clerk. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, I mean, hearing those numbers, I was just going to suggest, then can you offer us a 2% or a 2.25 and then a 2.5, like those three numbers, 2.25 and 2.5, kind of reverse it, rather than just tell us what it's going to be to meet those three numbers. And maybe that's somewhere we're looking to land, and council can decide somewhere between 2.5 or 2% and 2.5%. Sounds like that's where the conversation is leading. So I don't know if Jocelyn can quickly pull those numbers together and what that would mean to the life cycle special levy as far as what would have to fall on those.
I understand, Mr. Mayor, the reduction by 20,000 took us to 2.46, right, Jocelyn? So that gives you, so if you take 20,000, you're at 2.46. If you take 30,000, you're probably at 2.3, right? I think that's it. If we work that in increments of 10, maybe Jocelyn can comment about that.
You muted you, Jocelyn.
Yeah. So if we reduced the recreation, then it would to 30,000. That would take us to a 2.3. I'm hesitant to reduce roads with the position that we're in right now. Just my recommendation.
Okay, just give me a moment here. Bonnie, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
All right, so where we're at, we've gone through all the financial reports. The 5-year capital plan it was just received for information. It was adjusted a little bit with those changes to the Keene ballpark that we discussed earlier. And then Jocelyn's prepared a chart listing the impacts of the different property tax classes based upon where the draft budget sits, which is at a tax rate increase of 2.78%. The only 3 obvious areas that we can tinker with if we're not comfortable with the 2.78% tax rate is in the OMPF special levy, which in this budget is at $125,000. And the reason for that is it will just leave us at $100,000, which in 2023, hopefully the council of the day will agree to allocate that to reserves, which completely weans Otonabee-South Monaghan off of OMPF funding for operational revenue. So if we leave the OMPF special levy at 125, and it seemed to be the consensus among the discussion with council members that that was acceptable, the 2 areas that we could adjust if we wanted to was the special levy lines. The special levy for recreation is currently sitting at $60,000, and the special levy for roads is currently sitting at $100,000. If Councillor Powers asked about reducing that by a total of $20,000, the staff recommended it come out of recreation. That would bring us down to a 2.46% tax rate increase. And again, the discussion seems to be the tax rate increase is hopefully somewhere south of 2.5. That would do it.
And okay, certainly I would support that 2.46, and I totally agree with Jocelyn to not touch roads. We're not doing anything extra on roads this year.
Correct.
And so that's certainly going to have to change in the future. And I think the 100,000 for the special funding reserve. What are our reserves sitting right now on recreation?
We'll have staff get you that number.
I'm sorry, apparently us and 66 other households are the ones that are out of hydro for some reason.
Yeah, well, that's okay. We can make this work.
So our arena reserves are estimated, and this number will change depending on what is spent in capital in the current year. But arena is sitting at 78,000 estimate, and parks is sitting at 142,000.
Okay, I feel more comfortable looking at the recreational side and leaving roads intact.
Okay, very good. Let me just flip the screen here to Councillor Howie. Councillor Howie, what are your thoughts on this? You're muted, Ken.
There we go. My thought is keeping the OMPF the same. Like you say, it's nice we can get rid of that eventually. My question would be taking the 2 out totally and just see what the percentage drops to. I'm not saying that that's what I want to do. I'm just want to see how much of our tax increase is a result of the 2.
Okay, so just playing. Jocelyn, if you plug $160,000 into operating, what does that do to the tax rate? It's going to bring it down to nearly 0.
You want me?
Yeah, Councillor Howie wondered, what does that do to the tax rate?
It brings us to less than 0.
Yeah, 0%.
Okay, that just shows that our increase is more of an investment that we're doing.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go back to, are there any, Councillor Allen, go ahead, Mark.
Thanks again. I'm just, I'm throwing this out. I know we have support for the OMPF, but you said it yourself, that leaves the council of the day in another term, $100,000 to work on And I'm just gonna make the suggestion that we leave them $125,000 to work on, and we reduce the parks by that 30,000, and then reduce the OMPF special levy by 25. And I'm just throwing that out there to see if I get any traction. Thanks.
Okay, what I'm gonna have to do is start looking for motions, because I want to.
Well, I can make that motion. I'll make that a motion. I'll make that a motion.
So Councillor Allen is making the motion that we adjust our draft budget by dropping the OMPF special levy to 100,000 and dropping the life cycle recreation to 30,000. Is that correct, Councillor Allen?
Yes, that's what yeah.
All right.
So that's
what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look. Councillor Allen has made that motion. I'm going to look for a seconder. Bonnie, just yay or nay. I can't see a show of hands. So yay or nay to that motion.
Okay, now the OPF, what was in the budget was 125.
Correct.
Okay, no.
Councillor Powers?
I'm not comfortable with that one, no.
Councillor Howie, are you willing to second that motion?
No.
Okay, that motion is lost. There was no seconder. Do I have another motion from a member of council? Councillor Powers.
I will make.
Okay, go ahead, Bonnie.
The OPF funding remain the same. Roads, the special levy at 100 and recreation at 30.
Drop recreation to 30,000. It's currently at 60. Is that your motion?
Yes.
60. Okay. Again, we're going to have to do it the same way. I'm looking for a seconder, Councillor, but I can see everybody's hand. So put a hand up, please, if you're willing to second that motion. And Heather, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not seeing a seconder to that. Correct? That motion is lost. Councillor Powers, go ahead.
I'm wondering, maybe it sounds like we're splitting hairs on each of the individual pieces here overall, but I mean, is it better for us, it sounds like, maybe to go, I don't know, line by line here, but I'm comfortable with the deputy's motion, except for the recreation reduction. I'd like to see, because we're making some investments in recreation. We've just asked the recreation department for investments in 2 new projects in the next 2 years. So I'd be comfortable with just keeping the deputy's motion, with the exception that we only reduced recreation by 20,000 instead of 30,000.
So I mean, you can amend the motion, or I would suggest, Councillor Powers.
You know something, I am certainly a friendly amendment. I would go for changing the recreation to 40.
Okay,
And
so
take Councillor Powers' friendly amendment. I would agree to that.
So we're just going to procedure, just going to make it easier, Bonnie. If you can just reword your original motion to adjust the special life cycle recreation to $40,000. That's going to be a lot cleaner. Okay.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. So adjustment to the life cycle recreation to 40,000, roads remaining for the life cycle, reserve at 100, and certainly our funding at 125 remains the same.
So that's the only change is what we'll talk about. And the change is to reduce the recreational special levy to 40,000, reduce it by $20,000. And Jocelyn's already
so that would be
calculated
a 33% decrease in the recreational life cycle, I should say.
I'm sorry. The Councillor Powers' recommendation or amendment was to reduce the special levy recreation to $40,000. It's currently sitting at 60.
Which is a third.
Okay.
Which is a third, yes.
Which is a third. And
Mr. Mayor, if I could offer a suggestion, I would hope that you would put all of these in the one motion, so we would have the approval for the motion for all of these particular items rather than this.
So if I may interrupt, I had made the motion. could I just amend the motion to show a decrease in the recreational life cycle reserve to be put at 40?
Correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call for a motion that council approve the 2022 draft budget with all of the line items that we were looking at here, except the only change be to reduce the recreation special levy by $20,000 to a total of $40,000. And that will give us a tax rate increase for 2022 budget of 2.46%. So are all council members clear on that motion? And Deputy Clerk, is that the motion you're prepared to put forward?
Yes, that is the motion I'm prepared. Do you,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Let me just flip the screen here. Do I have a seconder? All in favor of the motion? Sorry, Councillor Allen has seconded that motion.
That's right. And can I
Now
ask for a
we're-
recorded vote too? Thanks.
And Councillor Allen has asked for a recorded vote.
Just say yes or no, please, when I call your name out, and I'll go alphabetically. So Alan,
No,
Councillor Howie,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Clark,
Yes.
Councillor Powers,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor.
Yes.
The motion's carried.
Okay, council, very good work, good discussion. We now have a draft budget that we can present at our next meeting for approval. Heather, do you need a motion to that effect, or is what we just did sufficient?
Ivan, go to the other room, hon.
That's sufficient, Mayor Taylor.
Okay. All right, I don't know that we, thank you. Thank you to staff. Thank you to council. And I don't know that there's a whole lot more that we need to do or say. But our draft budget is approved, 2.46% tax rate increase. I really do believe it reflects the concerns of the citizens today, but also the needs of the future. I think we've again tried to find that balance, and it's never easy, but I think we've done a pretty good job of it. So I want to thank all the council members for that.
And if I may add, Mayor Taylor and the staff, because these were tight budgets, and they did a lot of work to bring these in.
Staff have done an incredible amount of work, and certainly they do deserve our thanks and our appreciation. And they've tried to provide us with sage advice, you know, and then we pay them for that. And I think if sometimes without a little restraint from staff, council might not be as cautious, and that's a good thing. Anyway, I think with that, we can wrap it up. So we just need a motion to adjourn. Alan and Howie, we're all in favor. Thank you again, staff. Thank you, council. And a regular budget meeting is next Monday. A regular council meeting is next Monday. And keep December 15th in the morning ready for a hopeful special meeting to buy a pumper truck. Good night, everybody.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thanks.